So now I have the tremendous honor of introducing who I think is by far the most interesting speaker of the day for me. Me. I'm not going to go through this whole about me slide where I tell you about all the great things I've done. The vast majority of you already know me. Most of you probably considerably more than you're comfortable with. So those of you who don't know me, you can learn about me on my website. You can follow me on Twitter. You can send me an email, or you can engage in my personal favorite form of communication. You can talk to me. I tend to be fairly friendly. I will be here for the rest of the evening. I will be here all day tomorrow. And I go to Scrum Beers pretty much every time that it happens. Obviously for the discussions, because that's what I'm after. I tend to be a little animated when I talk, so I think I might be a problem for the sound guy. I'm going to try to remain stiff. Let's see how it works out. Before I start, pro tip. If you're ever organizing a conference, don't also decide to speak at it. So, I'm here today to talk about backlog refinement. So I figured a good way to start the talk was with a very simple user story. As a Brewing Agile participant, I want a way to get my requirements process up and running quickly so that I can improve the flow into my team. And then I ask myself, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to improve the flow into my team? So what problems am I trying to alleviate with this talk? Unproductive sprint planning is probably the biggest one. How many people here have had a sprint planning that sounds a little bit like this? It's long, it's hot, it smells in the room, and at the end of the day, everybody agrees to the plan simply to get out of the room. Hands? A fair few people. So I got the right audience anyway, that's good. Identified the right stakeholders. This is obviously not the feeling we want when we finish sprint planning, is it? We want people to leave the room and want them to be energized and think, wow, this is a great plan. Obviously it's going to go horribly wrong tomorrow, but as for today, it's an excellent plan, right? And there's a lot of waste in this, obviously. Low energy causes low productivity, which, isn't very good. So there's a lot of ROI in improving the inflow into the team. It pays back very, very quickly. And the other problem I'm trying to alleviate, one of the biggest ones is, although I encounter a lot of people who say, yeah, I know. Oh, that was closer. Yes. You just keep doing that throughout. It's probably the best way to go. So I encounter a lot of people who know that what they need is refinement. They need to start working on the inflow into the team, but a lot of people have difficulty knowing where to start. So these are the problems I'm trying to alleviate. And with all user stories, I like to talk about what I don't intend to accomplish. I do not intend to provide you with a perfect solution or a defined set of process steps that you're going to follow that will result in exactly what you want. What we're talking about here is a bootstrapping method. Something that can get you up and running quickly, but then obviously you need to look at what works in your specific context and find a way to make it work for you. So, not yet. So, a backlog is, at least in most cases, essentially a collection of work to be done. So where does work come from in an organization? This was not a rhetorical question. I'm looking for people to shout things out. Where does work come from? Stakeholders. Can we be a little more specific? Customers, yeah. Where else? Investors. Where else? The team, yeah. Other teams. Users. They differ from customers? Okay, we take that talk after, yeah? Yeah. It felt like that could go on for a while. Okay, we've got some general idea. Does any work sort of show up on its own? Without anyone requesting it? No? That does sometimes. Okay, that does sometimes appear unexpectedly and for reasons we're not really sure of, but that's again feels like a discussion that's a little out of scope for this. I'll give you a hint. Work that appears on its own is probably some of the most common form of work a lot of you do. Oh, there we go. Bugs, poor quality. So, we have a lot of different inflows that come into our sprints. How do we deal with this? How do we prioritize different inflows? I like to visualize, first of all. I think it's a very effective tool for communicating. And one thing I like to do is I like to visualize all the inflow. See, this is where I would normally get animated and run and like so on and so forth, but yeah, I try to like this. I like to visualize the different inflows from the different stakeholders. See here in this example, we have customers, we have the team, we have bugs, we have a marketing department that comes from another team. One of the things I really like about this is it allows stakeholders to think for themselves about what their highest priority is. They have their own little list where they can look at and they can say, what of my requests is the most important for me? But then we need to start moving them all into a common list, and that's where the other part of this becomes helpful. This helps facilitate those discussions. This makes it so as we move stuff into the common backlog, everybody starts to say, oh, well, yeah, okay, it was highest priority to me, but maybe it's not actually the highest priority compared to everything else that other people have. Obviously, occasionally you have the person who's convinced their thing is highest priority, but once again, going a little out of scope for this discussion. So we take stuff from the various stakeholders, and we move it into a common area where it's prioritized against one another. So then we go into, from the what I call backlog column, we go into trying to figure out what this stuff actually means. Who here has had a one-liner in their backlog before? That's pretty much everybody. I saw one once at a company I was at. I won't be specific, but it was my favorite one ever. Make the next version of the product better than this version of the product. I'm not sure who's ever requested the opposite, but apparently it must be happening somewhere. So we have a backlog, and then we need to start having the discussions about what these things actually involve, elaborating them to a point that they become useful for us. So this is a basic structure you can get started with. Product owner refinement, team refinement. This could be customer refinement, product owner refinement, team refinement, whatever it might be. The point is we sort of go through a bit of a loop here, having discussions back and forth, asking questions, finding out the answers, asking more questions, until we reach a level that we're reasonably satisfied with. Then we can move it into actually being ready. And this is what I think most people think of when they think of a backlog. They think of something that's in a ready state that can actually be worked on. Good on the sound? I haven't gotten any comments yet. It's closer, please. Okay. I could do this one, but it feels really weird. Anyway, so the back and forth between the team and the refinement seems to be one of the big areas that people have trouble getting started with. Now, I'm very hesitant to give people templates, but I've done it in this instance just to get you up and running. If I wasn't clear earlier, this is not a defined set of steps. User story, we're all familiar with as a, I want, so that I can. Always ask yourself the question, what is the actual problem we are trying to solve here? Not the solution that people are asking for, but the actual problem we are trying to solve. Obviously, looking at the numbers, business value estimate, these types of things. I have this high up because people usually want to reference this quickly, but it's actually quite late in the discussions usually before I get into at least estimating the thing. I want to have as much information as possible before doing that. Stakeholders, invite to review meeting. This I keep in the actual item, so we never forget that these people are supposed to be invited to actually see the thing that they requested. And this is just simply a list of stakeholders, people who actually want the thing that came from those original columns or whatever it might be, just to remind us that we want to show it to the people. Acceptance criteria, what must this thing do? What won't this thing do? Many people skip that conversation. What won't this thing do? If you don't have that conversation, you could really just feature creep forever, couldn't you? You could just, I mean, if we don't define what it won't do, it can just be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Questions and answers is just sort of a documentation, for fear of using that terrible word, but we're having a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversations. What is it supposed to do here? How does it behave in this situation? Oh, I might not know the answer to that today. I'll go out and I'll find the answer. And this is just sort of keeping track of those discussions, because if we ask the question once, maybe we're going to need to know the answer later. Actions pending, that's just simply what are we going to do next? Does the product owner need to go out and ask somebody a question? I'm getting the look that it's not close enough again. Does the product owner need to go out and ask somebody a question? Does the team have to do a spike? Is there more work needed before we can estimate it? Whatever it is we're doing next with the thing, basically. Just a quick way of keeping track of that. And acceptance tests. How are we going to confirm this thing works? These are just some basic things to start the discussion. The blank page can be very intimidating. If we start with these things in a backlog item, it makes it a little bit easier to start the discussions. Now, there's a fun little part in the presentation here. I ran this for my girlfriend a couple of times, who was lovely and listened to me. And she said, "Getting a little heavy now, time for a joke." So I wrote that, time for a joke, but I didn't have time to come up with one, so I figured that would do. Oh, and how to demo. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that one. How to demo. A lot of us aren't in a situation yet where we have good demo environments set up. So when I talk about how to demo, I don't want to just talk about what to demo, but a lot of the times, where are we going to demo it? What kind of data are we going to use? These types of questions. We can answer those up front as well. So that's just something to get you started when you get into this flow. You can start looking at that template and a little bit of back and forth here to get the discussions flowing until we get to a point that we feel it's ready for implementation. I guess a lot of people have probably heard of definition of ready. I'm not going to give you a definition of ready, or I'm going to give you a starting point. Everyone in the team agrees that this is ready. Eventually, you probably want to elaborate that into a more specific definition of ready. Maybe you don't need to. It depends entirely on your context. But starting point, everyone in the team agrees they could pick this up and work on it tomorrow. And then it becomes quite easy. We just start pulling stuff from ready into the sprint. We just plock whatever's on. That was a very Swinglish thing to say there. We just take whatever's on the top of the backlog. We just take whatever's sitting on the top of the ready column and we bring it into sprint. We plan it. Some teams break it down into tasks, some don't. But the point is, this goes a lot easier. And this is where the ROI really comes into this. You're going from those long, hot, boring sprint planning sessions to very, very fast ones. In my previous team, and I have a witness here if we need to follow it up later, we went from virtually a whole day of sprint planning to the shortest ones were around 45 minutes. The long one started being an hour and a half, if it was a really bad one, just simply by meeting and doing this more regularly. And then we'd like to be in a state, all of us, we're done on the Scrum board is actually done, like in a customer's hands and they're happy with it. Unfortunately, a lot of teams are not in that state right off the get-go. So I also like to visualize the outflow. You know, in this example, we have a test deployment area, and then we have an awaiting deployment, and then we actually get to done. This works really well if there's a lot of handovers at the end of your process. If you're handing over to somebody who, you know, they're the deployment team, very quickly you'll start to see stuff stacking up here, and your stakeholders will start to ask the question, why are there 30 items in this? Well, because you told us we had to hand over to these guys, but if we didn't, think how much faster we could get through. It helps to spur on those discussions. People will see stuff starting to stack up here. And then when you put all this together, what do you get? You get to actually see the whole. From the moment my customer says they want something, to us prioritizing it, to us having the discussions that are necessary about it, the back and forth, ready to be worked on, being worked on, awaiting deployment process, done with preferably a happy customer. This allows you to see the entirety of the process very quickly and easily. It also has another sort of a side benefit. It helps with a little bit of abstraction. So the sprint probably has a bunch of steps that not everyone in this flow cares about in any way. They don't necessarily need to know if you're currently doing code reviews or if it's testing time or whatever it might be. They don't need to be involved in the day-to-day all the time. You can break that out and you can have it on a board. That can sit physically on your wall or whatever tool it is you might use. Maybe your product owner has a flow. Maybe they have something that they follow. This also fits very nicely in there. Everybody's getting the right amount of information at the right time. I'm sure you all know, if you took your customer in and asked them to look at your Scrum board, would they really understand it? It's supposed to create transparency, right? People often confuse visibility and transparency. Those are not necessarily the same thing. If you don't understand the information you're being shown, it's not terribly useful to you. This helps everybody develop a common language through the entirety of the flow. So, I always like to provide, I thought Ola's hand went up there. I always like to provide actionable items, specific things that you can do when you get back to work on Monday. I think I'm being told I'm running out of time. So, start visualizing your refinement flow. Now, I'd like to say that this is super easy. It is super easy, depending on your organization. Sometimes it can be a little bit harder to accomplish that than you'd like, but most of the time this is super easy. It's so easy that I strongly considered doing this as a live demo. But then I realized I was absolutely out of my mind and that was a terrible idea. But theoretically, I could have set all this up on the stage with you guys quite quickly using the tool I've been demonstrating so far. Put aside some time for refinement. I'm not saying that refinement as needed is a bad thing, but the problem is most people aren't doing it. The best way to fix that is to have a cadence. Put aside an hour every second week. Put aside half an hour every week. Whatever it is you can do, start with something, start with anything. It pays back very, very, very quickly. And then talk about what ready means for your team. This becomes quite an important conversation, especially once you start visualizing ready. We won't get too much into that. Now, the exciting part. I'm going to tell you the absolute most important secret to backlog refinement. Does anybody know what it is? Who said it? Close enough. Conversations. People and interactions over processes and tools. These things are processes and tools purely made to facilitate the communication between all the people that need to be involved. You can set every last bit of what I just showed you up, and if you're not talking to each other, it's not going to help at all. If you're using this system as a way to not speak to each other, you can be sure it's not going to help at all. If you're assigning these things as tickets to one another and then waiting for them to land back on your desk because you don't need to deal with them anymore, it's not going to help at all. These are purely to help facilitate the discussions between customers, managers, teams, product owners, whoever else is involved in the conversation. So, I'm rounding off now. I just need to run through my acceptance criteria to see if I've fulfilled the user story I set out to do. I wanted to provide a basic structure and some actionable takeaways, and then I have some acceptance tests to see whether I've done that or not. Oh, and what it wouldn't do, sorry. This definitely won't fix all your problems overnight, in case I haven't made that clear the like 5 times I've said it. My acceptance tests, I would like a thumbs up from everyone who got an actionable takeaway from this presentation. That's definitely more than 50%. Excellent. Acceptance test passed. The next one actually takes place over the beer for the rest of the night, so we can't pass it to just this very minute, but at least 3 people tell Jeff they enjoyed the talk, and I should have added and want to discuss it a little bit more. And then my final acceptance test, the audience applauds. Applauds. Thank you. Now, it would have been great if I could have just exited the stage there, but unfortunately I'm supposed to take questions and I have to do the outro. So, questions? Does it matter? Oh, sorry, the question was, what do I call this process? I should probably get a cool acronym. That's how I get famous, right? That's how I write a book. I'll work on that and I get back to you. No, I don't have a name for it. Anything else? You're not even going to ask what tool it was so you get some free publicity? No? No? That would be a smart move. What tool is it? Excellent question. This is a tool called Campbell, which is developed by 2 guys who we have here with us.